Melissa Turner boarded the Miami to Los Angeles flight with the confidence of someone who thought rules didn't apply to her. But within hours, passengers would watch in shock as this so-called first-class Karen was dragged off the plane in handcuffs, her hidden secrets spilling into the spotlight. Melissa Turner was no ordinary traveler. She had cultivated a reputation that seemed to follow her through airports across the country, a reputation that made airline staff brace themselves the moment her name appeared on the passenger list. To most people, first class was a place of comfort and calm. But for Melissa, it was her stage, a place to display her superiority and demand treatment she believed was owed to her. The morning of her trip from Miami to Los Angeles, she walked through the terminal with the same sharp confidence. She always carried a designer bag hanging from her arm, oversized sunglasses hiding eyes that scanned every detail of her surroundings. She wasn't just concerned about the luxury of her journey, she was worried about something much bigger. At check-in, she pressed for an upgrade she hadn't purchased. And when the staff hesitated, she unleashed the full weight of her temper. She was skilled at breaking down resistance, using her voice like a weapon until weary attendants gave her what she wanted. Most people watching would have thought she was simply entitled, but in truth, Melissa relied on these confrontations. They created a distraction, pulling focus away from the fact that she was moving through the airport carrying something that should have set off alarms. Hidden within her perfectly organized luggage was an item that, if discovered, would have kept her grounded and in handcuffs before she even made it to the gate. Security was unusually busy that day, lines of impatient travelers stretching far back, officers rushing to keep the process moving. Melissa slipped through with practiced ease, her designer bag passing through scanners without incident, though she never once let it out of sight. She exhaled in quiet relief when it was returned to her hands, clutching it tightly as though it contained her lifeline. No one around her realized the seriousness of what had just happened. To the people standing nearby, she was simply another impatient traveler, muttering about how long everything was taking and how unprofessional the airport staff appeared. But beneath her polished appearance and loud complaints, Melissa was hiding something that would soon shake the entire flight. As she settled into the boarding area, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone, she looked like any other wealthy traveler waiting for first-class priority boarding. Yet there was a tension in her movements, a stiffness that betrayed the calm she tried to project. The truth was, Melissa had been living on borrowed time, gambling that her arrogance and sense of untouchability would keep her safe. On that morning, as the boarding call echoed through the terminal, she had no idea her luck was about to run out. At 30,000 feet, the moment Melissa stepped onto the plane, the atmosphere shifted. The flight attendants exchanged subtle glances, as if bracing themselves for a storm they knew was coming. She moved with a deliberate air, tossing her coat into the overhead bin without care for the passengers seated beneath it, then sinking into her wide leather first-class seat with an expression of entitlement. Champagne was demanded before the doors had even closed, her tone sharp and impatient. To most, she looked like a wealthy woman accustomed to privilege, but underneath her polished exterior, she was guarding her handbag as though it contained something far more valuable than clothing or makeup. She rested it carefully against her legs, her hand rarely leaving the strap, her eyes darting each time someone passed too close. The cabin settled into quiet routine as the plane taxied down the runway, but Melissa created her own turbulence. She called attendants over repeatedly, questioning the temperature of her drink, complaining about the quality of the pillow, and snapping at a fellow passenger who dared to recline his seat. She was a master of disruption, weaving conflict into even the smallest details. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other when she raised her voice, but no one dared confront her directly. Everyone had seen her type before, a traveler who believed first class granted her dominion over the cabin. Still, there was something different this time, something more unsettling. A businessman seated nearby began to notice how protective she was of the bag by her feet. Unlike other travelers who casually tuck their belongings away, Melissa never let hers leave her sight. Even during the meal service, she maneuvered the bag closer, positioning her body to shield it from view. Her constant glances at the zipper, her stiff posture whenever someone leaned over, and her refusal to place it in the overhead bin painted a picture of obsession. The businessman grew uneasy, silently cataloging her behavior, wondering what could be inside that inspired such vigilance. Flight attendants, though occupied with service, began to notice the same pattern. Their experience taught them to distinguish between difficult passengers and suspicious ones, and Melissa seemed to fall into both categories. Her tantrums distracted everyone from the quiet tension surrounding her possession. Though she appeared consumed by petty complaints, her mind was locked on one thing: keeping that bag under her control. At 30,000 feet, surrounded by strangers and sealed inside a metal tube, Melissa's charade was beginning to unravel. What started as entitlement was slowly morphing into something far more dangerous, and the people around her were beginning to sense it. As the hours in the air passed, Melissa's behavior grew more erratic. At first, her actions were brushed off as typical entitlement, the kind of chaos many had witnessed from her type before. But soon, her demands escalated beyond the ordinary. She insisted the flight attendants allow her to speak with the captain, claiming she had important information about the flight's safety. Her tone was commanding, laced with the arrogance of someone who believed rules existed for others, but not for her. The attendants firmly declined, but Melissa refused to take her seat during turbulence, gripping her handbag tighter with each bump of the aircraft. The more resistance she faced, the more unhinged she appeared, her eyes flashing with a strange mix of panic and defiance. The businessman in the seat beside her noticed every detail. He had spent enough time flying to recognize nervous travelers, but this wasn't nervousness. It was paranoia. Melissa checked her bag constantly, unzipping it just enough to glance inside before sealing it shut again. At one point, she even pulled it onto her lap and cradled it, shielding it with her arms like a protective parent. To anyone watching closely, it was clear she wasn't just worried about losing valuables, she was terrified of the bag leaving her control. By now, whispers had spread among passengers. The energy in the cabin shifted as people grew more alert, their eyes drawn to Melissa each time her voice rose. Flight attendants, already at their limit, quietly relayed the situation to the captain. The decision was made to keep her under observation and notify authorities on the ground. Yet as the minutes dragged on, Melissa's agitation increased, making containment more difficult. The breaking point came when a flight attendant suggested storing the bag in the overhead bin for safety during turbulence. Melissa's reaction was explosive. She clutched the bag to her chest, shouting in protest, her face flushed with fury. The sudden outburst startled nearby passengers, and several reached for their phones, sensing the moment could turn into something bigger. For the crew, the warning signs were clear. This was no longer just about entitlement or disruption. It was about concealment. From that moment forward, every eye in first class was fixed on Melissa and her mysterious bag. The rest of the flight felt tense and uneasy, as though the passengers and crew alike were holding their breath. Somewhere beneath her polished image and expensive accessories, Melissa was hiding a secret too dangerous to stay hidden much longer. The stage was being set for her dramatic downfall, and the descent had already begun. When the plane finally touched down in Los Angeles, relief swept through the cabin, but it was short-lived. Through the windows, flashing blue and red lights cast sharp colors across the tarmac. Passengers exchanged nervous looks as multiple vehicles pulled up alongside the jet bridge. The announcement of arrival felt routine, yet the sight outside suggested anything but normal. Within minutes, uniformed officers and federal agents boarded the aircraft, their presence commanding immediate silence. Everyone knew who they had come for, and all eyes turned toward Melissa, who sat stiffly in her seat, her bag still clutched like a lifeline. At first, Melissa tried to project calm. She adjusted her sunglasses, smoothed her hair, and spoke in a voice dripping with false composure. She insisted she had done nothing wrong, that she was simply a victim of misunderstanding. But as the officers moved closer, her FOD cracked. She pulled the handbag onto her lap and crossed her arms over it as though preparing for a fight. Passengers leaned into the aisle, phones raised to capture what was about to unfold. The quiet hum of recording devices filled the air, amplifying the tension. The lead officer ordered her to surrender the bag. Melissa refused, claiming it contained private items, nothing of concern to anyone else. Her voice grew louder, drawing a mixture of groans and whispers from the crowd. She protested about her rights, accused the airline of targeting her unfairly, and demanded the immediate removal of the officers, but the agents were unmoved, their focus locked entirely on the suspicious woman before them. The more she resisted, the more her composure unraveled, until the commanding tone gave way to frantic desperation. The standoff could not last forever. With one swift motion, officers surrounded her seat. As they reached for the bag, Melissa clung to it with every ounce of strength, her legs kicking against the confined space of the aisle. Her screams echoed through the cabin, a piercing sound that filled every corner. The struggle ended only when the officers wrenched the bag free and forced her from the seat. She was dragged down the narrow aisle as passengers stared wide-eyed, their cameras capturing the dramatic arrest that would soon circle the internet. When the handbag finally spilled open, its contents shocked everyone. Stacks of counterfeit credit cards, forged identification documents, and several small packets of illegal pills tumbled onto the floor. The glamorous first-class passenger had been concealing a criminal empire in plain sight. What began as an ordinary flight had ended in a spectacle that exposed Melissa Turner for who she truly was. The story of Melissa Turner did not end when she was dragged from the plane. By the time the footage hit social media, she had already earned a viral nickname, the First-Class Karen. Clips of her shouting, resisting officers, and clutching her designer bag spread across every platform, replayed millions of times within hours. News outlets quickly picked up the story, piecing together her background and the shocking details of what investigators discovered inside her belongings. The polished woman who once glided through airports as if untouchable was now infamous, her face plastered across television screens and online headlines. She had become a symbol of entitlement turned criminal, and the public could not look away. Authorities wasted no time digging into her past. What began as suspicion of disorderly conduct on a flight soon unraveled into something far larger. Investigators connected the forged IDs and counterfeit credit cards to an elaborate scheme that spanned multiple states. Melissa had been living a double life, traveling under stolen identities, draining bank accounts, and vanishing before victims realized what had happened. For years, she had slipped through the cracks, her luxury lifestyle funded by fraud. Flying first class was not just a taste of indulgence. It was part of her disguise, a way to appear legitimate and blend in among the wealthy. Yet her arrogance proved to be her undoing. By drawing constant attention to herself in the air, she ensured that no one could ignore her. What might have remained a routine flight turned into a stage for her downfall. The passengers who once sighed at her entitled behavior became witnesses to the unraveling of her secret life. The businessman beside her, the flight attendants who reported her suspicious actions, and the officers waiting at the gate all played a role in exposing her. Melissa's arrest set off a chain of consequences she could not escape. Prosecutors built a strong case, connecting her to dozens of fraudulent accounts and illicit transactions. Her carefully crafted image of sophistication collapsed in the courtroom, where she faced years of prison time. The handbag she had once protected so fiercely was now evidence against her, a symbol of greed disguised as glamour. What began as an ordinary flight became one of the most sensational mid-air arrests ever caught on camera. Melissa Turner went from sipping champagne at 30,000 feet to standing in front of a judge, stripped of the entitlement that once defined her. Her downfall was not just about crime, it was about the danger of believing you are untouchable. In the end, her name became etched in internet infamy, a cautionary tale of arrogance, deception, and the moment it all came crashing down.